I'm Michael Odom.
I'm Brandon Shields.
And I'm Craig Thomas, and you're watching the Midweek Crunch here at JacksonSun.com. Hi everybody, welcome to the Midweek Crunch here at JacksonSun.com. It is week 7 of the high school football season. It is upon us, and we're excited about the high school football every week, but especially this week with all the big games we've got. I mean, we've got 8 big matchups we're going to talk about, and honestly, there's more good games even than those. But lots of really good action coming up this Friday, and if you haven't got to a high school football game yet this year, this is a good week to do it, no doubt about it. We're going to talk about a handful of games here in West Tennessee. We're going to start though with some dynamic duels, some games that might not look at like one of those marquee games, but could still be could still provide some pretty good entertainment, pretty good action. And we'll start with the one you picked, Brandon. That's Memphis Northside at Middleton. Yeah,
I know a lot of people wouldn't expect this one to kind of be on the list of big games. For a high school football Friday night, and honestly, this probably isn't a big game. But it's still going to have some kind of historical significance, I think. Definitely if Middleton gets this win, it's going to be the first time in a few years that Middleton has won a game within district or region play. We're back to regions now. I know during the 6 years of the Z plan, they didn't win a single district game. In 15A, they were usually number 6 behind Scotts Hill, who would get their one win against Middleton. So they're trying to break that streak, and they think that there's a possibility they can get to the playoffs. It starts with a region win. They need to get that this week, and I think they've got a definite shot at getting that against Memphis Northside, who has won a game this year and is doing something else that they hadn't done in past years, which is score points. That's something that Middleton's defense is going to have to watch out for. But I think they still have the ability to get this win.
Okay. Michael, your dynamic duel this week features the Gibson County Pioneers as they head to Lauderdale County to take on Halls.
Right. Brandon did a story this weekend on Gibson County and how much they've improved, but they're yet to win a region game. This is where they're going to show how good they've improved. Both these teams are winless in region play, and if Gibson County has improved as much as we think they have, this is a good chance for them to get that region win and show that they're competitive for a playoff spot. They do have 4 wins on the season. They've gained momentum. Morgan Cruz has built this program from the bottom up and, doing it the right way. And I think this team is ready to show just how good they can be. And this is a Halls team. Their 3 wins are all out of district against lesser opponents. In district, they've struggled, or in region they've struggled. So this is a good chance for Gibson County to get that first region win.
I'm going to go with Jackson Christian and Adamsville. It's probably a game that might not have been one that you'd look at as necessarily a dynamic duel, and certainly in previous years, I definitely don't think it would have looked honestly like it might be kind of ugly. But this year we're talking about an Adamsville team that, despite a pretty good 4-1 record, despite a 2-0 region record, had a lot of questions coming in. It's still not maybe that vintage Adamsville team with that bruising experience running back, and they do have good O-line play still. We know about that, but had some more questions coming in, and while I think Adamsville will and should win the game, it's still an opportunity for them to kind of show what they can do. Being one of the small school powers. Jackson Christian, on the other hand, not totally unlike Gibson County, although maybe not the same exact history, of course, is still trying to bring that program up, build it up a little bit. The Eagles have made a little bit of progress. You wrote about that this past week after their Scotts Hill game. I think, obviously, Jackson Christian still some things to work on. Adamsville will be a challenge for him. An opportunity for them to show some things against a pretty good team, though, right?
Yeah, Adamsville's getting the wins that they should be getting, with the exception of that beating they took from Hardin County in week 2. But they're still, or they're not beating teams as badly as they have been in years past. And granted, up to this point, every single one of their games has been against a team that won its region or district last year. So you got to take that into perspective. But still, they're not dominating like Adamsville teams in the recent past have. Plus, like you mentioned, Jackson Christian finally played a complete game last week, or the most complete game that they have played so far this year. If they do that again, that was good enough to compete with Scotts Hill and fall just short. If they do that again this week, is enough to compete with Adamsville? Maybe. I don't think so, but it's possible. But it's still kind of there's still also kind of the question mark there with Adamsville. They played their best game against Mackenzie the last time they were out there. but that was 2 weeks ago. Any momentum that they had going into that game, has that been squandered now because of the fact they had last week off? So it's high school football. Those are some questions that normally go along with the team. So we'll find out about all that Friday night.
All right, stick with us just a second. We'll talk about some of the big games coming up here in West Tennessee.
My name is Justice Faust. I'm a freshman here at Jackson State, and my major is mass communications. The community college really focuses on academics, and that's what I needed. We have the Academic Assistance Center, we have the library, we have the Student Union building. All of the teachers are helpful. It seems like here at this community college, everybody really cares about getting you to where you need to go.
Jackson State. Stay close. Go far.
All right, welcome back to Midweek Crunch. Usually, guys, we take one segment and talk about the biggest games, the marquee games here in the West Tennessee. But there's so many this week, everybody, that we're going to have actually two segments. We've split it up with the big schools and the small schools. And we're going to talk about some of those top games.
This is the biggest lineup of games at any level ever, I think.
Maybe.
Of football games. Maybe not all sports, but definitely football.
We can say, though, for this show in 2015, this is the best slate of games. We can all agree on that, I think.
All right. If you want to put a qualifier on it.
I do. But for the big schools, we'll start with one right here in the city, Crockett County at 3-2, coming in to visit Jackson Northside at 4-2. Do you guys have a sense how this might play out?
2 weeks ago, Northside took a loss to Lexington. Fourth quarter, they looked defeated, and they let that game get away from them by a large margin. So the question was, could they regroup going forward? A lot of sophomores on the field for Northside, very young. How could Tab Val get that team ready to go? And obviously, he was able to regroup them, refocus, because they went up to Dyer County last week and got a win. Now they have another tough test. This time it's at home against a Crockett County team who struggled at times, especially the last 2 weeks. But how does this Northside respond to adversity? Can they go down a touchdown and still be able to win a ball game? And I think that's going to be a good test this week for Northside.
This time last week, we were talking about Crockett County. We were wondering exactly how they were going to come out in response to something they hadn't done since week 10 of the 2013 season, and that's playing a game after a loss. When they took that loss to, who did they lose to 2 weeks ago?
Hardin County.
Hardin County, thank you. Well, now they're having to come back from their second straight loss after they got beat by Haywood last week, and they came out flat. Haywood scored 19 straight points to start the game. Now they kept Haywood from scoring in the final three quarters. So if you want to take a moral victory from it, boom, there's your moral victory. But they still lost, and they're still 1-2 in the region play. They need a win, but at the same time, Northside doesn't need to take any more losses with a 2-1 record, 3-1 record in the region. They want to stay kind of in that conversation, not just for the playoffs, but for the region championship. If Hardin County were to stumble, which they have them next week. So, but both of these teams have kind of proven in their struggles they've got to play their best game for an entire 4 quarters. Crockett County came out flat last week in the first quarter. They lost. Northside in both of its losses came by letting the other team pull ahead late in the game in both their losses. So whichever one of these young teams can do its best job of playing a consistent 4 quarters should have the advantage in this one.
All right, you mentioned a little bit the Haywood Tomcats. A good season to this point at 4-1 under first-year head coach Steve Hookfin. They've got a really big test in Brownsville this week against a Hardin County team that's undefeated and has looked good doing it. Do you guys think Haywood can pull a little bit of an upset here? I mean, how do you think this game will play out?
Hardin County has played well at home. They have a great atmosphere down there in Savannah, and they get pumped up and they're ready to go at home games. But when they went on the road to Dyer County a couple weeks ago against the team that's on the bottom of the region, they almost laid a dud. I mean, they had to have a defensive stop at the 1 yard line, as time expired to get that win. So this is a Hardin County. Can they go on the road to Brownsville and keep that momentum and get the hype that they were at home? Haywood is not going to be a team that's going to lay down, so they're going to have to come out and play a good 4 quarters. They're going to have good defense, good offense. This is not just a game they can walk through and expect to get a win.
Before I talk, do you want to kind of expand a little bit on the laying the dud metaphor there?
I think it's what happens when you're about to lay an egg, but you also show up and it's a dud.
Right, but seriously though, I mean, kind of talking about what you were saying, we had Matthew Smith, Hardin County's head coach, on the radio this week, and he kind of talked about just the whole difference between a home game and the atmosphere there and a road game. You know, he said it's really easy for the kids to kind of get motivated and get up for that game when they're walking through the Tiger Walk and they look out in their parking lot and they see 15 tents set up and they see grills all over the place, and you got people playing cornhole, and you got College Game Day setting up their stage there for the big games. I don't think that's happened yet, but it could happen.
It's the atmosphere.
It's the atmosphere. It's similar to Alabama Ole Miss a couple weeks ago, I would imagine. But then they go to Dyer County, and all that's not there. And so they kind of, I can see how that can kind of take you out of your rhythm in preparing for the game. But you know, I don't know if Matt Smith needs to tell all of his grillers, hey, get your grills in the back of your trucks and drive to Brownsville so that we can set up the same atmosphere or whatever they need to do. But Haywood's not going to let them, get by with a lot. This is a really good defense, y'all. Nobody has scored a lot of points on this team. I mean, in their one loss to Lexington, that was still a defensive game where Lexington scored a couple of touchdowns late to win 22-8. So, they've just got to be ready to come out strong in the first quarter and be ready to take whatever Haywood hits them with and be ready to punch back with it.
Here at Jackson Southside last week, the Hawks had a very big game. They were 5-0 coming in, had kind of the talk of the town really is for the people who really follow high school football. And they failed the test, frankly, against the Dyersburg team that's pretty good. We knew that coming in, and that sent Southside to their first loss. They've got another big test right back here at Southside against the South Gibson Hornets, who are 5-0, and looking to see how deep they can take this undefeated run. How do you guys see this game playing out?
You know, what a turnaround South Gibson's had from 2-8 last year to 5-0 this year. They're a team that's definitely on the rise. They've been playing well this year. Stidham's got them ready to go. And they've had last week off, so he's going to have his team ready to go. He came down here, was able to scout Southside. And so I think that ability is going to really help South Gibson know exactly what Southside's going to run. You know, Southside is still had to change some of their game plan with Drew Birney's injury. And him being out the rest of the season. He was such an offensive weapon. So South Gibson, doesn't have to worry about him because they saw how Southside ran their offense last week. And I think that if they're going to be a team that wants to push for a home playoff win or a home playoff game, this is going to be a good first step.
Oh, before they get a home playoff win, they need a home playoff game, so they need to push for that first. But last week, y'all might remember, I didn't say I was necessarily rooting for Southside to beat Dyersburg, but I would really like to have seen it because I was planning on being at the South Gibson game the following week, and I wanted to see an undefeated matchup. You let me down, Southside, and you let this helmet down, and you just let everybody down who was looking forward to an undefeated game this week. But it'll still be a good one because one loss versus undefeated in Week 7 is still a fun game to get to look forward to and get ready to watch. And they can't do what they did last week. Craig, you were here at the game. The final score was 44-12?
51-12.
51-12, okay. Even worse. They, I was hearing some talk yesterday that it was still close in the second half or in the second quarter, but there was a little bit of some of the players were getting frustrated, and the effort wasn't there as much in the third quarter as it had been in previous games. And that's a good way to let a good team like Dyersburg jump out and beat you by 39 points in the second half when you're only down by 12 at halftime. They can't afford to do that again this week. South Gibson's got the athletes. They may not be as big as Southside, or it's probably about the same size-wise. South Gibson's got some good athletes. They've got to keep playing all four quarters to try to stop guys like Tyler Dysart, Dre McAllister, Austin Duncan, their quarterback, and I mean Southside can't afford to do that. And this is a time where they're going to come. They need to come back if they're going to prove that they are a team to be respected. yeah, we lost last week, but we're not going to let that define us. We're going to come back and beat a good team.
Another team trying to get a win over a very good team is the Westview Chargers, coming down here to Jackson at 2-3. They've got to take on the team that might be still to this point the most impressive in the area. Hardin County would have something to say about that for sure. But the Liberty Crusaders are on a roll, no doubt about it. Offense, defense, special teams, they got it going on in every department at 6-0. Can Westview threaten this Liberty team and push them to the brink a little bit?
What Westview team is going to show up? Is it going to be the team that beat Dyersburg by 20 points, easily beat Camden, or is it going to be the one that's taken these 3 losses and not look very good in those games? Westview has the capabilities to compete against good teams, but they've been very inconsistent. They easily beat a Dyersburg team that played well with Liberty. Liberty only beat them by 5. So this is or 2, I'm sorry. So this is a Westview team that's got to gain some confidence knowing, all right, we beat Dyersburg easily. They played with Liberty. We can go down to Jackson and compete against this Liberty team. Records need to just go out the window. And I think that Coach Cody is going to have his team ready to come down here and try and compete against a team like Liberty.
If Westview is going to compete with Liberty and the size and speed that Liberty has and that they've been running over everybody with, you just mentioned kind of the key that's going to keep them competitive in it, and that is Don Cody and his coaching staff. He's been the head coach there for 25 years. Think about that. Nearly as long as we've been alive, he's been coaching. Possibly as long as head coach at Liberty, Tyler Turner's been alive. But so for that many years coaching, Liberty's not going to throw at anything at Westview that their coaching staff hasn't seen already and that they hadn't already had to defend or try to stop. So you got to think that they kind of already know how to do it. There shouldn't be any kind of, okay, how do we do it? Now it's just the question is, this is how we do it. Can their guys actually do it? As we've already mentioned, there is a size and speed disadvantage, but they just got to kind of keep them from executing their game plan, particularly in the pass game.
All right, stay right with us. More big game analysis on the way.
College life is all about discovery, discovering new opportunities, new ways of thinking and learning, discovering the latest in technology and innovation. A campus lifestyle that will mold you and help you develop into a well-rounded, successful individual. Start your next chapter in life here at UT Martin Jackson Center. Day and evening classes available, 6 bachelor degrees, North Jackson 45 bypass, UT Martin Jackson Center.
Like he's in it too.
All right, we're back here at the Midweek Crunch, JacksonSun.com. We've talked about some of the big games involving the bigger schools in our area. We've got probably just as many big games involving some of the smaller schools. We'll start with one in Carroll County as the Trinity Christian Academy Lions visit Mackenzie.
Please raise your hand if you thought that TCA was going to go to Riverside last week and put up 62 points. No, you didn't. Quit lying.
Okay.
Exactly.
I thought it in the third quarter, but go ahead.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's how it works a lot with you, it seems like.
TCA, not only, it wasn't going to be a surprise if they went down and won, but TCA struggled in the early part of the season, but they went down and dominated Riverside. That was the spark that they needed going forward to know that we can compete against any team in our region. They get a Mackenzie team coming off of a big loss. Trinity, this is basically for a home playoff game as the number 2 seed. Both teams have already lost to Adamsville, who's the best team in that region, and this is going to be for that number 2 spot, meaning you get to play at home. If Trinity can continue that last week's spark and score the type of points that they're capable of, they should be able to go up and beat Mackenzie on the road.
They should be able to, if for nothing else. I mean, what's the difference between the 2 wins the last 2 weeks and the 4 losses before?
They're competition.
Well, yeah. Okay, stop it. Okay, let me make my point. They're putting the ball in their playmakers' hands more. In the first 4 games, there was a link there, but there was an indirect link there as far as from the snap to getting it in Goldsmith's hands. Now that he's the quarterback, or at least he has been the last 2 weeks, if he gets the ball sooner, it's even harder for them to try to stop it, and for the defense to try to stop it. Now, yes, level of competition and injuries have kind of played a factor into it as well, but Football one-on-one is get the ball in your playmakers' hands and let them make plays. I know before they made the move, I know there were some people who were coming to Blake Butler and saying, hey, you need to line Andrew Goldsmith up quarterback, see how that works. And I'm fairly certain Butler probably thought about that before they did. But, there was just the issue there of he's also our leading tackler. Do we want to put that much on him and then risk him getting wore out to where it's not even worth it for him to play defense and we lose our best tackler, and then we're essentially just trying to outscore teams. He went ahead and took the gamble, and so far it's working. Now, kind of what you said, Mackenzie will be a step up in competition with Andrew at the quarterback spot. So you got to wonder just how well they can keep doing that against Mackenzie's defense, and can Goldsmith keep continuing to be effective against Jack Server and Eric Robinson and that whole group. So, but definitely. Adamsville's probably got the lock, assuming they beat Jackson Christian this week. They probably got the lock on first place in the region. Winner this one probably, unless something drastic happens with Gibson County or Jackson Christian toward the end of the season. This game is probably for that other home playoff spot.
Riverside comes in at 3-3, as we mentioned. Off that loss, a big loss to Trinity Christian Academy. Scottsdale does not have an Andrew Goldsmith, but they've got a good team. They're 4-2, and outside of the Week 1 loss to McNary, pretty good season, right, Michael?
That's right. This is a big rivalry, and just like we talked about in the last game, this is for a home playoff game. I think this very much is for a home playoff game also. If Waverly's going to be one in that region, I think Riverside and Scottsdale are playing for the number 2 spot. This is a big rivalry. They do not like each other, not as bad as Chester County Lexington, but they did last year send, those flower bouquets you see at funerals that they stand around the graves. They send it to Riverside, and Riverside had a little fun punting it around the field after the game when they beat them. Scottsdale, you take away that first loss to McNary, and this is a Scottsdale team that's had a good season. That loss to McNary was, I don't know, strange. Chalk it up to strange or, first game jitters, or just throw it out in the trash.
Summer witchcraft.
There you go. Yes, let's talk witchcraft in the football midweek crunch. But, Scottsdale's had a good season, and they've progressed and gotten better, and I think this is a game that's very winnable for them at home.
It is very winnable for them at home, but one thing that probably has no direct effect on this game, but could still have an effect on this game, is the fact that Scottsdale's never beaten Riverside. Scottsdale, the last couple of seasons have been about making history. Last year, they won their first ever third win last year, or first time they ever eclipsed 2 wins in a season. Made it to the playoffs for the first time ever last year. Last week, for the first time ever, they won their 4th straight game. This week would be their 5th straight win if they were to win it. It would also be their first time ever beating Riverside. They've been close the last couple of years. Michael, you were there. They turned the ball over 5 times, still only lost by 5 points. They came away from that game feeling like they should have had that win. Flowers or not. So the thing that I'm looking for just out of Scottsdale, I saw them last week, and quite frankly, they did not perform as well as I was expecting them to. And Michael Strout talked to him after the game, and he said, guys, we just made a lot of mistakes tonight. He said the difference between a good team and a great team is those great teams eliminate the trash that the good teams still have to deal with. He said, all we got to do is just go be great. And so I'm looking to see will they eliminate all those mistakes and actually become looking like a great team in this one.
Our next matchup features 2 teams that have shown some moments of greatness, throughout the year, and even in previous years. We were talking earlier, Dresden and Peabody, not an undefeated matchup. Peabody has that 1 loss to Union City, but when the only loss between 2 teams is 1 to Union City, that's about as close to an undefeated matchup as you can have in West Tennessee. Dresden 6-0, Peabody 5-1. Do you guys have a sense of who might have the upper hand in this game?
This is not only the marquee game in West Tennessee, this is the marquee game in the state of Tennessee. When you have number 2 versus number 3 in the state playing each other, and you could list the skill players on both sides of the ball. With Peabody, their new quarterback in Jacob Taylor, Kendrick Malone, Brandon Johnson. You go to the other side of Dresden, Dresser Wynn, Quincy McDonald. They have the skill players to be a great team, to make a deep playoff run. This is going to have to be a game that's going to be won in the trenches. Which team can open holes and get the blocks needed for those skill players to do what they need to do?
I accuse you of overhyping a lot, but I'm with you on this. I think it's a great game. I mean, what do you think about Dresden Peabody?
Y'all think it's bigger than MTSU and Vanderbilt?
Yes.
I mean,
but don't leave out your 4-0 Memphis Tigers.
That's right. That's a big game, too.
The best team in the state of Tennessee, college football.
But seriously, I believe – that's Michael that said that, Ball fans. But, yeah, biggest game of the week across the entire state. I will definitely jump on that bandwagon as well. And Michael already went over the laundry list of the great players that are going to be on each side of this of the ball in this game. But I'll throw a few more out there. Dylan Yates at Dresden, their running back. He's among the leaders in West Tennessee rushing stats as far as yards go, and he's got a lot of touchdowns as well. And what makes him effective is when you're a defense lining up against Dresden, you got to respect that pass offense. When you got a quarterback like Dresden Wynn, there's a receiver like Quincy McDonald and the rest of the athletes they got there. You can't put 9 guys in the box and just expect that you're just going to be okay. But because they don't have those 9 guys in the box, Dylan Yates is a good enough athlete that he's going to be good for 5 or 6 yards. Well, if you run the ball on first down every play and you get that kind of output, then you're looking at 2nd and 4 more times than not. And so that just puts your offense in a really good position to keep continuing to move the chains and producing. Then, of course, there's the on the other side, Kevon Goodwin and Hayden Bogus are a couple of receivers who Hayden Bogus and Kevon Goodwin, they continue to produce and help out that passing game. And quite frankly, those 2 guys have probably been a big factor in helping Jacob Taylor kind of settle into that quarterback spot since they've dealt with their off-field issues as a team for Peabody. So just knowing that these 2 offenses have the ability to make the plays and the different options to make the plays. Craig, you're watching this game this week, and you may not be back at the office till midnight because there's going to be so many points scored.
Yeah, and I think, Michael, you made a good point earlier in talking about this game. The line play could be a big difference maker. Who can, give their offensive playmakers more of an opportunity to, show out in a big game. Huntington does host an undefeated matchup at 5-0. They host Houston County, which is also 5-0. Can the Mustangs get another big win this week?
Going into the season, the 2 front runners for this region were Wayne County and Huntington. That's what the talk was about. They've backed it up so far, but now all of a sudden we have this Houston County team that's 5-0 and saying, hey, don't forget about the Irish. And but they have to go on the road to Huntington, which is not going to be an easy place to play. Houston County is a team that's not known for success in recent years, but has found it and has been building this program. But Huntington's going to be a totally different atmosphere than they've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, Huntington they're 5-0 this year, and they played a couple of good teams. They played Camden, they played Milan. Mackenzie, thank you. I knew there was somebody else in there I was forgetting. They played some good teams, and I'll even go back to their jamboree in Lexington. They dominated that game too, and to the point that the Lexington fans are on the Huntington bandwagon when you talk about 1A football. Houston County is going to see a team unlike anything they've seen up to this point this season. I'm not saying that Huntington's got this game won already, but I'm going to be shocked if we find out his final score from this game and Huntington doesn't have a win. And just the level of football they're playing right now. And I don't know much about Houston County as a team. I know that their schedule at this point hasn't been that impressive. So I think that Houston County is going to be brought down to earth, and it's not going to be pretty. It'll probably be more of a crash this week.
Wow. All right. Well, just to kind of recap, that's 8 games we've talked about as big games here in West Tennessee: at Northside, at Southside, at Liberty, at Haywood, at Mackenzie, at Scotts Hill, at Peabody, at Huntington. There is some place to go this week and see some good quality high school football. So if you haven't done that yet, this is a great week to do it. But stay with us in just a second. We'll talk about some of the players to watch and also the close calls here in West Tennessee.
When you don't study for the ACT, you receive a low score. When you receive a low score, you punch the wall in anger. When you punch the wall in anger, your little brother repeats your actions to gain your approval. When your little brother tries to gain your approval, the sophomores misread his actions as a challenge. When the sophomores misread his actions as a challenge, your little brother ends up on the nurse's table. Don't let your little brother end up on the nurse's table with internal bruises and a black eye. Study for the ACT.
All right, we're back here at the Midweek Crunch. We're going to talk about several players to watch. Brandon, you picked a young man from Gibson County. Tell us about Ozzie Rico.
Michael, you've been here longer than Craig or I have been. When was the last time Gibson County had a leader among the local rushing leaders in football?
Not in my lifetime.
Wow. And that's been about as long as they've had a football program too. So, this is Ozzie Rico is a freshman who's come in and just really helped out this team. He was expected to kind of be a part of the ball carrying rotation, but he wasn't going to be the workhorse for it until their starter went down with an ACL tear in week 1. So he's kind of, I don't know if I want to say this early, he's kind of the front runner for freshman of the year, but he's definitely going to be in the conversation for it with 700 yards and 5 touchdowns on 120 carries. Maybe his touchdowns production proportion-wise isn't what you would expect with that many yards, but he probably hadn't needed to score that many touchdowns because they've won a lot of games, particularly last week in Oak Haven and against the teams from Kentucky. They won them big, so he probably didn't play a lot in those games. But he's still managing to give them a definite weapon to maybe even a kind of a go-to weapon that they can depend on, that they probably will need a little more as they get into the meat of their schedule toward the end of the season, because they still got Jackson Christian, Adamsville, TCA. All these games are going to be big for them. Plus, it all starts this week with Halls.
We talked about that. We talked about that Dresden Peabody game and how big of a game it is. You know, all the playmakers are involved. Why does Brandon Johnson stand out to you as an important one?
You know, you look at last week in their big win, he had 15 carries, 171 yards, 3 touchdowns. And he's going to have to be that workhorse again this week, moving the ball down the field to set up some Peabody touchdowns, because those could be either there's going to be a lot of those with both offenses, or this could be a defensive struggle. But I expect more of lots of touchdowns. So he's going to have to be able to get the ball down the field to set up Peabody to get into the end zone. We've mentioned him before, and he just seems to bring it each and every week and be among the leading rushers for Peabody. Now they've had some easy wins along the way, and he hasn't had to play the whole game. But when he's been in there, he's been tough to stop.
We talked about how big of a game Hardin County has in Brownsville against the Haywood Tomcats coming up this week. And we've talked a good bit in the past few weeks about how important Cal Gobble is, quarterback for Hardin County, arguably one of the top playmakers in West Tennessee. But one guy to not forget, in my opinion, is Nick Godwin, the receiver at Hardin County, the top receiver at Hardin County. I think he's going to have a big influence on this game. We obviously know, what the defense has to do, what Gobble has to do at quarterback, but you got to have somebody to throw to sometimes. It can't be all rushes, like we talked about, earlier today. I think Godwin needs to have a big game to not only just to get Hardin County up the field, but I think he also needs to have a big game just to make sort of be a threat that Haywood has to keep their eye on, sort of like we talked about earlier. This is not a Haywood defense that you just want to run 50 times at, because it's big and physical, and they're just not going to let you pick up that much yardage. You have to have a passing game. Hardin County has that. It needs to show up this week.
Yeah, I think his performance, not only for this week's game, but also for the rest of the year. It was 3 years ago when Hardin County had one of the better offenses in the area in the first half of the year, and then the quarterback Kendall Atkinson went down with a concussion. I'm not saying Cal Gobble's about to get a concussion or anything, but if Hardin County has that passing threat or receiving threat on the edge that they need to account for, then they don't need to run Cal Gobble 40 times against Haywood's defense because of or even 20 or 30 times, because if he runs that many times and takes that many hits from this defense, and guys like Emmett Gooden, he's going to wake up Saturday and Sunday and Monday, maybe even Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, still feeling it, and that's something that you don't want your quarterback to be doing.
All right, close calls. Brandon, you went with Dyersburg and Milan. Why?
It was a good pick. I mean, if for nothing else, but just for the name recognition of the two programs. These have been two of the best teams around here for years, for the most part. Actually, I thought before the season this was going to be the region championship, but Liberty kind of shut that talk up by beating both of those teams. And at Milan and Dyersburg. But these two teams they have had their struggles at times this year, but they have had their times where they've looked really good, had shown shades of brilliance. Both teams want to do that this week because this is an important game. Each team, Milan is a game ahead of Dyersburg in the region race, 2-1, and Dyersburg's coming in at 1-2. If Dyersburg were to win this one, they would own the tiebreaker over Milan for obvious reasons. So you got to think that with two undefeated teams in this region and then one lost team in Southside, right now they're playing for who's going to have the inside track on that 4th spot in the playoffs. The winner of this is going to have that, and still there's some some football left to play before the playoffs. And they each have a chance to kind of move up in the standings. But if the season ended right now, this would be a very, very important game.
Mm-hmm. Michael, for your close call, you went with two teams that, just to be honest, have not had good seasons to this point and have had a lot of struggle. But you made some good points when we were talking about this earlier about why this could be a close game between West Carroll and Gleason.
All right, both these teams are combined one win. Not much has gone right for either of these teams. They haven't looked extremely strong. But they play in a tough region, and they've taken some losses against some really good teams. But both of these teams need to come in knowing that this is a winnable game, and we need to build some momentum. West Carroll's gone through some adversity early in the season. New coach, player that passed away right before the season started, and they need to find something good in this season, something to build off of. And I think a win here would be a big start to that. Gleason does have the one win against a team out of Kentucky. But this is still a Gleason team that's wanting to build and get a couple wins. So this is a game that both teams can go in knowing we can win this game, and I think that's going to add to the intensity of both these programs.
Yeah, I went with Jackson Central Mary at McNary. You might look at JCM at 0-6 and think, why would you pick a close call there? Obviously, they've had trouble against some of the city teams like Liberty and Northside, but did pretty well against Southside. Honestly, should have won that game. I think they're playing a McNary team that is not going to overwhelm them from an athleticism standpoint. It's not going to overwhelm them from a team standpoint. I think this is a team they ought to be able to play with. We talked about some of the issues McNary has. I mean, maybe the most snake-bitten team at the beginning of the year when it came to injuries.
Right.
Obviously, some issues there that has sort of triggered some lack of consistency, I guess, in sort of the strategy and sort of their team identity. And McNary's still trying to sort of figure that sort of thing out. JCM, I think, has had some similar issues as far as just deciding who they want to be and what they're going to do and if they can, and trying to get to do it effectively. So these teams have both had some issues. When I look at it, I don't see an obvious winner. I think it could kind of go either way. And then Brandon, you made an interesting point just from an emotional standpoint as far as JCM goes.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that there's three reasons if you want to go with JCM to win this game. There's three reasons that to do that, and you kind of touched on one. Just the fact that going back to July or preseason, they were planning on being in the flex bone. Then when they had their running back, Tate Newsom, go down, they changed to the wing T, I believe. Well, since they changed to the wing T, they showed up at South Gibson and Milan last week and running the spread. I'm sure that Coach Hodge is making that decision because he feels like that's the best thing to do for his team. But I don't see how a group of players can really go with confidence constantly switching offenses like that. But that's the reason why he's in the coaching office, and I'm sitting here talking about him and sitting in the coach's office. Number two is Bryant Bowers. That's JCM's quarterback. Or he was our quarterback last week. He was listed as one of our other standout players last week in the Player of the Week article. He accounted for 5 touchdowns for JCM in their loss to Liberty. And you got to think that if he's athletic enough and can produce 5 touchdowns against a team like Liberty, surely he can have the same kind of production against McNary. The third thing, and kind of I think what you were just about to touch on, there's a lot of talk in the news right now about just the fact that this very well could be the last year we have a football team representing Jackson Central Marion High School Cougars. Right now they're 0-6. After this week, they got Milan, they got Dyersburg, and they have Westview. If they want to avoid a winless season in their final season as a school, this is probably the game where they need to do that. So I don't know how much that they would be talking about that among the coaches in the locker room, but it's got to be in the back of their mind. And you know, I'm not saying I'm rooting against McNary in this one. I'm just saying it would be a really good feel-good story if JCM were to get this win this week and get some positivity going into the final month, possibly of football for Jackson Central Marion High School.
All right. Any other thoughts for you guys going into Week 7?
Well, you talked earlier on about how big this week of games is, and I totally agree with you on that. And the Super Bowl is a big game every year, and apparently this year they're not doing it, but for the first 49 years they had Roman numerals indicating what number of the Super Bowl it was. I think we need this week. This is week Roman numeral 7.
All right. Well, for all your week Roman numeral 7 coverage of high school football here in West Tennessee, it just rolls off the tongue so easily.
It does, yes.
You know, stick with Jackson Sun and JacksonSun.com. We'll have feature stories, analysis throughout the week. Friday morning, the Blitz, where we have some preview capsules of all the games. The stats package where you look at who the top playmakers have been at several different spots on the football field throughout West Tennessee. And also Friday night, of course, will be at a lot of these games with stories, photos, video. Then Friday night on JacksonSun.com, you'll check all that stuff out. And then Saturday morning in your Jackson Sun newspaper as well. So thank you for sticking with us and watching the Midweek Crunch. Have a great week.